Hello and welcome to this online education covering the topic of cold water rescue. The topics we'll cover in this video include what you should know about cold water rescue in Woodbury, understanding our response, including units that will respond, PPE and other gear that will be used, and what type of incident command structure we'll establish. And just like a discussion of structure fires, we'll also discuss the different strategies that can be applied for different ice rescues under varying conditions. And finally, we'll talk about how we'll wrap up these incidents, including maintenance of our equipment. While you might not normally think of water rescues or ice rescues when you think about the city of Woodbury, but the fact is, with dozens of lakes and holding ponds in and around the city of Woodbury, the potential for an ice rescue is always a possibility, especially considering the large number of residents that take advantage of winter sports, including things like ice fishing and snowmobiling. Beyond the types of incidents that can occur when people choose to be out on a frozen lake, Woodbury also has dozens of holding ponds, which could mean that an ice rescue could be required if a vehicle were to slide off a road and into one of these frozen ponds. The risk to a victim falling through the ice includes not just the possibility of drowning, of course, it also includes the high probability that the person will succumb to hypothermia unless they are removed from the water quickly. Just a 4-degree drop in body temperature is all it takes to reach hypothermia, so timing is critical when a cold water rescue is required. For a quick summary of ice strength guidelines, when ice has reached a thickness of 2 inches, it is considered thick enough for one person to walk on it. 4 inches thick is considered strong enough to support a group of people. 5 inches thick will provide enough support for a snowmobile, while the ice will need to be at least 8 inches thick for a car and 12 inches thick for a light truck. Although these guidelines are well established and should be known to anyone living in cold weather climates, every year there are dozens of stories of cars and trucks dropping through the ice, and in a 5-season span from 2011 to 2016, there have been 18 ice-related deaths in Minnesota, including one in Washington County. When responding to an ice rescue in Woodbury, our response will include the duty officer, one engine with a crew of at least 2 rescuers, an ambulance, and Woodbury's rescue boat with 2 rescuers. Depending upon the amount of open water, the boat itself may or may not be used as part of the rescue, but at a minimum, this unit and the response will ensure that at least 2 additional rescuers are available, regardless of the rescue strategy. And of course, the response can include any other units per the request of the incident commander. Like at structure fires and vehicle fires, we'll be establishing an incident command structure at any cold water rescue, including the establishment of a warm zone and a hot zone, which will be defined by the incident commander and managed by the appropriate division officer. While there is no hard and fast rule for where the warm zone and hot zones should exist, a good rule of thumb is that the entire lake could be considered the warm zone, which means that only authorized personnel may be on the lake, while the hot zone will be any area surrounding the open water, which could constitute a risk to any rescuers. For example, if the ice began to thin out in a 20-foot radius around the hole where the victim had fallen in, then the hot zone could be considered a 30-foot radius around the hole. Any rescuer within that hot zone must be in a cold water suit, while all other rescuers and personnel would need to remain outside of that zone. And like at a fire, any personnel who move from the warm zone to the hot zone must only do so at the direction of the division officer, and they must transition through accountability. As mentioned, while a good rule of thumb may be to consider the entire frozen lake the warm zone, depending upon the conditions, the lake itself might be considered the hot zone, with the warm zone extending further up on the shore. For example, in early spring, the entire lake may have thawed to the point where anywhere on the lake would constitute a risk to rescuers, meaning that no one would be allowed on the lake without a cold water rescue suit. In that case, the division officer, the accountability officer, and the safety officer should remain on shore in the warm zone, with the entire ice sheet being considered the hot zone. As with all other incidents that we train for in Woodbury, the incident command structure would also include EMS and rehab, staging, and incident command, all remaining in the cold zone. When preparing for an ice rescue, you should retrieve the equipment from your engine and ambulance, which will include 2 or more cold water suits, which will be required for anyone entering the hot zone. You should also retrieve the ice rescue bag. And you should also retrieve personal flotation devices, or PFDs, which will be required for anyone on the shore or in the warm zone. Donning a cold water suit isn't quite as easy as donning bunker gear, and an assistant can be a big help. If you are wearing bunker gear when you respond, remove your bunker gear before donning the suit. To use the reach strategy, the rescuer should lie in their belly and approach the area of open water. The rescuer can then reach to the victim using a pike pole or a backboard. When doing so, encourage the victim to kick with their feet while you pull them out. Remember that even after a few minutes in the water, the victim is likely going to have slipped into hypothermia, and they'll quickly lose manual dexterity as their body moves blood from their extremities to their core. Even when the rescuer is within feet of the victim may be unable to hold onto the pike pole or backboard, and another strategy might be required. Using the throw strategy will require the throw rope, which is contained in the cold water rescue bag. In addition to the throw rope, the bag also includes a longer rescue rope, which will be used to connect one rescuer acting as a tender to another rescuer when a go strategy is required. The bag also includes an ice anchor and self-rescue ice picks. To use the throw rope, you should loosen the bag's cinch strap and pull out 3 to 4 feet of rope. Holding the strap on the bottom of the bag and hanging onto the carabiner, toss the bag using an underhand throw over the shoulder of the victim. Encourage the victim to loop the rope around their arms several times rather than simply trying to hold onto the rope. Ask them to kick their legs as you pull. Even if the victim has almost no manual dexterity, if they were able to successfully wrap the rope multiple times around their arm, you can gain enough leverage to pull them out. If a reach or throw strategy are unsuccessful or impractical, you'll need to choose the go strategy, which requires one rescuer to go into the water and a second rescuer to act as a tender. If the tender can remain on the shore, their PPE can be limited to a personal flotation device, but if they must also be on the ice, they should be in a cold water suit, even if they remain outside the hot zone. When the tender in a 2-person ice rescue must go onto the ice, the rescue rope should be anchored to a solid ice sheet by using the ice anchor. To use the ice anchor, remove the protective cap at the end and apply significant pressure as you screw the anchor into the ice. After the anchor is in place, the large carabiner on the bottom of the rescue bag should then be attached to the ice anchor. Next, the large carabiner inside the bag should be clipped to the front of the second rescuer, and that rescuer should carry the other carabiner. That other carabiner will be used to loop around and attach to the victim. After being attached to the tender rope, the in-water rescuer will move toward the open water as the tender feeds rope out. Once reaching open water, the in-water rescuer should enter the water feet first, but far enough from the victim to allow the rescuer to approach the victim from behind and avoid being pulled under. While reassuring the victim and explaining what you're about to do, wrap the second carabiner and rope around the victim and clip it to the front of your cold water suit. Signal the tender by patting your hand on your head, which will let the tender know to begin pulling you to the edge of the ice shelf. Once you've reached the edge of the ice shelf, signal to the tender when you're ready to be pulled out. Encourage the victim to pull themselves up by kicking their feet. If you find it necessary to perform a self-rescue, for example, if you're acting as a tender or a division officer or accountability officer and you fall through the ice yourself, you should slide to the edge of the ice shelf and pull yourself up while kicking your feet. Using ice picks will dramatically improve your ability to self-rescue. Once a cold water rescue or cold water rescue training is concluded, you should tag your cold water suits as being out of service and place them on the dryer at 2260. To repack the rope bags correctly, you should not simply loop the rope and stuff it back into the bag, which will result in a tangled mess when you use the throw rope or tender rope, and instead, the bag should be repacked by feeding the rope into the bag about a half an arm length at a time. Once the rope is completely back into the bag, it can be cinched shut. Thanks for reviewing Woodbury's cold water rescue training. At the live training, you'll have an opportunity to put this into practice as you work in two-person teams to practice the reach, throw, and go rescue strategies, as well as getting some experience performing a self-rescue with and without ice picks.